Alright guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to go over a story titled, My Selfishness Ruined My Family. And a big shout out to Victor for sending me this story. And guys, what we have here is definitely one of the biggest pity party stories you're ever going to hear. From a woman who is mid-40s, it sounds like, who completely ruined her family due to her selfish actions. And let me tell you, selfish with a capital S. She's married, been married a long time, with a great husband who's good to her on so many levels. Supportive, kind, loyal, all that. She's got a bunch of kids, and still she ruins it by having, wait for it, an affair. And this affair sadly leads to her husband catching her in the act, whipping that guy's butt big time, and get sent off to the slammer because of what happened. No joke. And you're going to see how this impacts everything. With the kids, with her in-laws, with her own family, all that. And yet the pity party will continue. But ultimately, she's going to get what she deserves on multiple fronts. You'll see this at the end of the story. And yet still, Miss Pity Party is going to be on. And I'm doing this to show you guys how sadly these things can happen. And how some people, and particularly the gals in particular, it's all about them. They don't care who they hurt, their husbands, their children, other family members, it's all about them. So for you relationship guys, you got to pay attention to this, pay attention to the red flags, and even if you're a great guy to your husband, to your girl, doesn't matter. They're still going to pull this crap, and you're going to see he was a great husband to her, but it didn't matter. But ultimately, she'll get what she deserves, and most certainly you guys will be wishing for that as I go through the story. That's about as much as I'm going to say, because this is a longer one, but I think you guys will enjoy this. So if you guys like to listen to these stories on a long drive to and from work, or while you're on the treadmill at the gym, or whatever, this is a good one because it's long. So, it starts off, it says here, I'm a selfish person. At least as what I say to myself repeatedly almost every night when I hear the silence in my home. My children aren't here. My ex-husband hates me with good reason. My immediate family is divided, and I never stop hating myself for what I did. My selfish act happened in 2015. I just turned 39, and I admit I took my ex-husband for granted. Well, that's an understatement, as you guys are about to see. My ex always told me that I was beautiful on a daily basis. Always wanted to have you-know-what, always took care of me and treated me like his equal. He never treated me like a queen or a princess. I was his partner. We've been married for 20 years by that time, high school sweethearts. Each other's one and only, and it felt right. My family loved him, my brother looked up to him, and my ex helped him through a lot of tough situations. My ex was the one people called when they were in trouble, and he helped them. He was a good man. When she says her ex, meaning her ex-husband, which there's a reason he's her ex-husband. So in other words, her husband's an awesome dude. And notice she said 20 years. And she's 39. They've been married since 19. Big mistake. Major mistake. Through the years, I gave him 2 headstrong boys. At the time of this, they were 18 and 16. And twin princesses at 13 years old. I gained weight and felt self-conscious, and he would tell me that I was beautiful. Our arguments were always few and far in between. We talked everything out, but when we did argue, it was usually about sex or lack of thereof on my behalf, and the things I refused to do in bed. Pay attention to that part, guys. She's not interested in the sex and things she refuses to do in bed. That's going to come back later. It wasn't as if I didn't want to do them, it's just that I wasn't in the mood and he understood. Bullshit. She didn't want to do them with him. When I turned 39, my birthday party was revealing the new me. I spent all year in the gym doing yoga and Pilates. My effort took me from being 180 to 135, and for me, it was an amazing transformation. Okay, good job doing that. That's the only piece of credit I'm going to give her in this whole thing, because that's dedication, that's hard work. Now watch what happens when she suddenly loses weight and starts getting better looking, and others notice. I've always been a chubby girl, so I have a body that was tight and fit. It was a new experience. My ex-husband also went to the gym with me, but not as much. However, he went from 260 to 225 and was starting to shape his body. My ex-husband couldn't keep his hands off me, but for some reason, I still wasn't in the mood. It's not like he didn't try. We went to dinners, danced, and did regular walks. He always helped out around the house, and I could see in his eyes how much he loved and lusted for me. 20 years together and he still looked at me with desire. I believe anyone would desperately want that, but mentally I just wasn't in the mood. At the time, I thought I was going through early menopause since we only had SEX 2, maybe 3 times a month, and it was just one and done. But he wanted more, and no matter how much he tried, I just wasn't into it. He mentioned couples counseling, and I refused. So, husband sounds like the dream husband on multiple fronts, and she's not interested. He wants to do all these things for her, counseling if that helps, because believe me, a lot of guys don't want to do that, but he's willing to do it. He was telling her she's beautiful even though when she was big, 180. I mean, I don't know how tall she is, but 180 is a big girl even if she's 6'2". And yet, not interested in him, not attracted to him. Now, I don't know, remember, she's the one telling this story. This is from her perspective. Let's keep that in mind. But I'm willing to bet you it's just simply, aside from her being a selfish a-hole, it's also the fact that this is what happens in a lot of marriages after a lot of kids. They got nothing to talk about. They're bored. Okay, he's not, but she is. And remember, she's been chubby her whole life, but now she's thin, and she can get attention elsewhere, which he's not mentioning just yet. That's a factor. And the fact that also that he was the one dude supposedly she hooked up with. That's another factor too. So now my selfishness comes into play. A new manager started working in my office a few days after my birthday. He was slightly younger and handsome, and for some reason, he took an interest in me. At first I ignored him, and then it went from ignoring to casual conversation, and then he flirted and I showed him my ring. According to her. However, after 2 months of constant flirting, I flirted back, which led me to telling him about my life. And I found myself thinking about him more and more. This was an emotional affair. I know that now, but at the time I felt high. My ex-husband suspected there was something off with me. We had a heated argument about it, one that I honestly believed started. Oh, she started the argument. Shocker. He went to kiss me, and I subsequently made a disgusted look. Or subconsciously made a disgusted look. It wasn't towards my ex, it was thinking about the man when he leaned in, and I felt disgusted about the whole thing. At least that's what I say to myself. She's full of shit. Completely. And by the way, the husband knows something's up. Men aren't stupid. They can see the red flags. He's still giving her a chance. And I think probably this husband's been, in my opinion, I think the husband, although a good guy, has been too nice to her, too giving, too kind. And on some level, whether she realized it or not, that made her lose respect for him. When women lose respect for them, what happens? They can't love him. And they certainly don't want to open those legs and do all sorts of freaky shit. Doesn't justify her actions, but I'm just saying what's reality. A week after that day, I told the new manager to meet me at a cafe so we can talk. Talk, huh? I had every intention to tell this man to leave me alone, to tell him that I can't do this. But before I could say anything to him, he kissed me and my mind went blank. That was the beginning of our 6-month affair. Well, it's all his fault. Not her fault. It was his fault because he kept pursuing me and kissed me. Newsflash, if she didn't like it, she could have made a complaint, as we all know, because by 2015, it was getting quite spread around that's about Me Too started. That guy could have been canned immediately. Nope. She wanted this. She enjoyed it. She's guilty. End of story. And by the way, obviously this dude knew she was married and didn't give a shit. So when you see what happens, he does, on some level, deserve what you're going to see what happens. During that time, I've done things to this man that my ex wanted. I was more eager, more willing. I was always in the mood. I believe it's because it was something new. Hear that? She's always in the mood for the SEX with this dude and to do all sorts of freaky stuff that she won't do with her husband. Why? Because she's attracted to this guy. Because she wants this guy. He's a challenge. It's horrible, but this is what happens. Meanwhile, her husband, although a good guy, probably was too good to her. And she felt that she didn't deserve it, therefore lost respect for him, had resentment for him. That's what I think was going on. And now she's singing the blues about how things are now in present day. My ex and I did have you-know-what during that time, but not as frequently. I began pushing him away, nitpicking on little habits. I even belittled him. I'm ashamed of how I treated him during that time. I only realized what I was doing when my brother came to visit me and told me that my ex confided to him about how depressed he was feeling and was thinking about filing a separation, saying that he felt that I didn't love him anymore. And he was starting to fall out of love with me, and that snapped me out of it. So I immediately called it off, quit my job, and told myself that I was going to make my husband feel loved and wanted. I was going to fix this. I was going to be a better wife if I could. This is her perspective. Let's keep this in mind. Yeah. The husband was about to be done, supposedly, and you couldn't blame him. My affair partner showed up at my house with a box from my office, stuff from my desk that I requested have shipped. Of all the people that could come to the house, it was him, huh? We spoke. He wanted to know what he did wrong, and I told him that I need to fix my marriage. I told him to leave, and he wanted to go one last round, and I told him no, and he begged and pleaded like a fool, and I agreed. He begged and pleaded for SCX? Yeah, in what universe does that actually lead to a guy getting the SCX? Bullshit. I don't buy what she's saying at all. And, of course, she went along with this in her husband's house, and you'll see in her husband's bed. But poor her. We went to the guest room. Okay, fine, the guest room. And we went at it. I do not know how long we were doing it, but when he was on top of me, I felt him violently jerk back, and there was a loud bang. I sat up, my ex was looking at me. My affair partner was on the floor, and there was a large hole in the wall. Her giant 225 husband grabbed that guy and threw him at the wall. I tried to say something to my ex, but his eyes were bloodshot. There were tears flowing, and his lips were trembling. I could see he was in so much pain, and I felt so disgusted. Yeah, I can tell she felt so bad, doing it in his house. I watched as my affair partner stood up and attempted to leave. My ex looked at him, and my affair partner told him that if he knew what was good for him, he'd step back. He's banging this guy's wife. The affair partner's banging this guy's wife, and he's saying if he knows what's good for him, he'll step back. In his house. Sure. So my ex attacked him. I screamed and cried, telling my ex to stop, and out of desperation, I jumped on his back, which resulted in me getting slammed to the floor. Your ex is whipping this guy's butt who's doing you, and you're jumping on your ex to stop him from hurting your affair partner? Yeah, I can tell you how much you love your husband here. Your actions show everything, lady. Everything got hazy for a while. Words sounded muffled, but when I came through, my ex had my affair partner on his side, and he was on the phone. All I could do was stare at my affair partner's swollen face and the blood and teeth on the floor beside him. There was a loud bang on the door, and I watched my ex put the phone on speaker, slowly placed it on the floor, dropped to his knees, and placed his hands on the back of his head. The door opened, and the police came in, handcuffed him, and the paramedics came in moments later. I soon learned that he called 911 on himself. So here's the part that seems a little off to me. This all seems a little rushed. In the movies, when somebody calls the cops, they will appear within 30 seconds. But this sounds like that happened. Unless she, throughout the craziness, passed out or something, this makes me question this part of the story, but fine. The cops came and he was arrested. So, as you can see, he demolished that guy. And nobody can blame it all for whipping that guy's ass. But there are consequences, because you do so much damage, what happens could happen. And one has to really, in the heat of the moment, anybody's capable of anything. But what you're going to see next, guys, was it worth it? Everything went to shit in a handbasket. At the hospital, my father didn't utter a word to me. He just looked at me with shame. My brother was yelling at me. He looked crushed, asking me how could I do that to my ex. My mother was consoling me, telling me that it was right, which caused my father to yell at her. Her mother was telling her what she did was right. Meanwhile, the father and brother want nothing to do with her. Shocker. His family was furious. His sisters threatened, and his parents looked like they wanted to send me to an early grave. I approached my children, and they refused to speak to me. My sons couldn't even look at me. My affair partner was heavily injured and needed reconstructive surgery on his face. My ex practically shattered his face. At the hospital, a woman came to my room and immediately attacked me. My brother pulled her off me, and turned out she was my affair partner's wife. I didn't know he was married. Sure. He never wore a ring, never once said anything. It made me feel even more terrible. You don't think she was going to do a little investigating on this guy? before having an affair with him for 6 months. Come on. Women dig up dirt on everybody, especially a guy they're hooking up with. Leading to the trial, my boys stayed with their grandparents on my husband's side, and my girls refused to talk to me. My ex didn't want to see me as well. I tried to visit him at county, and I was denied. My brother made sure my ex went to the correctional facility he was working at so he could keep an eye on him. How is that possible? Again, elements to this story make me question a few things. When I asked my brother if he could relay a message for me, he told me to go to hell. During the trial, it was the first time in 3 months that I saw him. He looked at me with such anger. It hurt more than anything I could ever imagine. He always looked at me with love, even when we were mad at each other. He always looked at me with love, but during the trial, it was hate. And I needed to excuse myself so I could cry in the restroom. All right, guys, repeat after me. Boo-hoo. Poor you. Look what you did here. Although your husband, even though that guy deserved an ass kicking, now your husband is going to be on trial for obviously assaulting this guy. And we all know what's going to happen. He's going to do time. Kids hate her. Whole family's torn apart because you need to have an affair. It wasn't like your husband wasn't giving you attention. Didn't want you even though when you were fat. Wasn't was always there for you and loyal. And boo-hoo for you. See, guys? Unbelievable. As the days went by, I was forced to recount my affair in every detail for all to hear. When I told them how long it was, my ex looked crushed, and my father stood up and walked out of the courtroom. Again, I'm wondering why these details of her affair were on trial. I think the husband's on trial for whipping that guy's butt big time. During my ex's testimony, I learned that he came home to surprise me with lunch and a weekend trip for 2 to the Catskills. He had a full romantic getaway planned, only to walk in on us as he reacted. He stated when the affair partner ordered him to step aside, he snapped and beat him, only to stop when he tossed me off him. He quickly called 911 and heard the recording at court. Hearing the pain in his voice, his sobs, as he did what the operator told him to do. It was soul-crushing. The affair partner couldn't verbally testify and was heavily medicated, so they used images of what he looked like, which turned my stomach because I was responsible for all this. My ex smashed his eye socket, cheekbones, and destroyed his jaw. They stated that there were bone fragments too small to piece together. That guy did one hell of a job on him. And by the way, again, as the story stated, it was the husband that called 911, I guess to stop him, or maybe to stop him from doing worse. I don't know. Again, weird. My ex was charged with third-degree felony and sentenced to 7 years, which caused my sons to shout out in protest, and my daughters and his family to let out a wail that haunts me to this day. Gee, thanks, wife. What a great wife. Again, this guy's responsible for his own actions, and nobody can blame him for beating the hell out of this guy. But look what happened here. Now he's doing time. Life is totally ruined. The first 3 months were torturous. I was sued by my soon-to-be ex's wife for alienation of affection. My ex filed for divorce. My eldest moved out, my other son stayed in his room, and my twins were rebelling hard. My former sister-in-law attacked me in the middle of a price chopper. His mother spat in my face when I tried to apologize to her. My father and brother refused to speak to me. Eventually, I needed to find a new job. There was no money coming in, and I nearly went through the savings, but I was pretty much blacklisted in my field. It was bad publicity for the accounting firm, so I started working in retail and worked as the seasonal H&R Block adjuster during the tax rush. I almost lost the house. My ex refused to allow me to visit him, and every letter was returned. Crying in the shower became an almost daily occurrence. My parents almost separated because my mother constantly defended me. My brother refused to acknowledge me. Even my friends, who I had known since grade school, were divided. Boo-hoo. I feel bad for the kids because obviously money isn't coming in and she deserves to be sued, but it's going to impact the kids. This whole shitstorm, everybody's affected but her. I mean, she's affected, but you know what I mean. And notice she said her mother is defending her. Big surprise. Because her mother probably did the same thing to her father. I got to wonder if those kids are his. Seriously. Because keep in mind, this is her perspective of the story here. Soon I began to have thoughts of ending things, of packing up my belongings and disappearing. The guilt was so heavy. Eventually I saw a therapist and she scolded me, told me that I just got comfortable with my ex. I didn't see him as a husband. I saw him as a friend with benefits and I treated him as much. She's right. I did. I got too comfortable with him. I saw him as a companion. Yet he saw me as his wife, mother of his children, the woman he loved and desired. I took him for granted. You'd think? So guys, a little intermission. So for your relationship guys, for you guys that you want to get married because your culture is the thing to do, or your religion, or whatever reason you want to do it, bear in mind, after a long time being married and having kids and all that, people get bored. It's a sad reality. And even a guy could do all these things to try to keep it interesting and fun and new. Still, you could have a gal like this that gets bored, loses attraction. And even if the guy's treats you like gold, doesn't matter. This type of shit that can happen. Just letting you guys be aware of this. Almost a year went by. A year of silence for my children. When I cook dinner, they will collect their food and go to their rooms, refusing to even look at me. I did have a few meltdowns, begging them to stay or to say something to me, but nothing. My brother got married and I wasn't invited. My kids were. I continued to visit my ex in hopes that he placed me on the visitor list, but I was always denied. He doesn't want to see you. He's your ex. He divorced you. Okay? He divorced you. He's not accepting your letters. He doesn't want to see you. If you want to do something for him, you leave him the fuck alone. Okay? Let him do his time and hopefully gets out for good behavior and let him move on. You've already ruined him and the kids. The best thing you can do, but she's selfish. She wants to say what she has to say to make herself feel better, not because she wants to make him feel better. Leave this guy alone. My letters were still being returned. It made me severely depressed, and I knew I deserved it. Well, then shut the fuck up. Then one day out of the blue, my brother showed up. I was shocked to see him and happy. This was the first time since the trial he came to my house, and he just came to scold me. Told me that my ex was in the infirmary after getting stabbed. An inmate tried to S-word assault him in his cell, resulting in my ex getting stabbed in his stomach and the inmate getting his spine broken. My brother screamed at me, "You did this," before going back to his truck. This poor guy. I cried for days after that. Guys, repeat after me. Boo-hoo. Because he was right. I did this. I tried to visit him at the infirmary and I was still denied. For 4 additional years, I tried to talk to him and still wrote him letters, but they were returned. Thankfully, our children visited their father a lot. That is how I learned that he was placed in protective custody by my brother since the attack. Through the years, my eldest went to the same college my ex attended and even took the same major. He only called his siblings. He never wanted to talk to me. He never comes to the house for the holidays, only to his grandparents. My other son followed suit by going to the same college and refusing to call me as well. My twins were hard on me as well, but they visited their father weekly, which bettered their mood, and whenever they got overly rebellious, they had their uncle put them in their place. But my brother and I still hardly spoke. I tried to visit his wife when they had their first child, but I was asked to leave. Karma's a bitch, lady. You're getting what you deserve. Your kids don't want to see you. Your family members don't want to see you. You brought this on yourself. You had a great... This lady had a marriage and situation that most women should die for. A guy that treated her that well, that's secure and all that. Good family. Nope. She has to ruin it. Got to have that drama. Sabotage the whole thing. Because it isn't just on the poor husband. How about the poor kids? And the husband's going to get out one day. You think it's going to be easy for him to get a job? To have a career? Provide? My mother kept me in the loop on what was happening in their lives. My father still refused to acknowledge me. Good for the father. Then at the beginning of May this year, my kids were happy and my sons came home. I didn't know why and I didn't care. They were home. For 4 months my children were around and I did everything I could to show them how sorry I was. But I was mostly ignored. But they were talking to me and it made me so happy to have a conversation with them. To know what was happening in their lives. My eldest was dating a woman for over a year. My second born was on a college track team. Even my girls began to talk to me again, and I hated myself even more for what I did to them. Seeing them smiling again, joking, and eating dinner together, I missed it so much. At the end of August, I was all gearing up for the twins' first day at their senior year, which falls on their 18th birthday. I expressed my excitement over their birthday party, told them what I was planning to do, and without hesitation, my girls asked me if we can do it on a different day. It confused me because I thought they were starting to get better. When I asked why, one of them said, "Because Dad is throwing us a party and I don't want you near him." Aha! Dad is finally out of the slammer. That comment shocked me. I asked when their father was released, and they said he got out at the end of April for good behavior. I cried because he was out, and it broke me a bit more. Boo-hoo. They were all around me because he was out. They were happier and cheerful because they had their father back in their lives. It wasn't because we were starting to heal. They had him back. I asked where he was staying, and they told me he was staying with my brother. I tried calling. I needed to talk to him, but he refused. I tried going over holding all the letters that were returned through the years, and I saw him briefly through the door crack. I shouted his name, and I was asked to leave by my brother. I handed him the letters and left. If you've been sending letters to this guy for 5 years, and he won't take them and refuses to see you, that means, wait for it, he doesn't want to see you. But she's so selfish. She cares about what she has to say to make herself feel better. If she truly cared about him and was sorry, wanted to give him something in return for all what he suffered, she'd leave him the hell alone. But she doesn't care. It's all about her. This is why she's flat out saying, I'm selfish. I'm selfish. At the start of the story. If you can actually realize you're that selfish, then stop acting that way. When I got to the driveway, I heard his voice. I turned around, he was walking towards me. I instantly started crying and went to hug him, and he handed me back my letters. He said to me, "You forgot this." He coldly said to me, and I cried watching him walk away. I begged him. I pleaded for him just to talk to me, and he just walked back to the house. My children were staring at me by the door, and they all had no love in their eyes for me. Boo-hoo. At that moment, I realized that my children were just tolerating me. However, I still want to fix this. How are you going to fix this? There's no fixing this. You fucked up royally. End of story. And I guarantee you, she wasn't exactly... I guarantee you this wasn't like happened overnight in terms of her behavior. I'm sure that she was probably a handful before this. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm willing to bet you that. You can't fix this. The best thing you can do is give everybody their space. Leave your ex alone. He's your ex now. You're not married anymore. And get some fucking real therapy and restart your life. And learn from all your mistakes. Stop being such a selfish a-hole. Amongst many other things. That's the best thing you can do. Leave him alone. End of story. And those kids will either come back to you in their own time or they won't. End of story. I wanted to fix this. I wanted to tell him how selfish I was. Trust me, he knows. I want to tell him how much I missed him. Tell him that I'm so sorry for destroying what we had. So I'm trying to still push this through my daily life. I learned from my mother that my affair partner's ex-wife was visiting my ex 2 years ago, and she's been coming around to see him. How interesting. The wife of the guy she was hooking up with, that family that was destroyed too, she's been coming to see the husband. And probably guess what they're going to be doing now. I just want him to somehow forgive me. I want him to talk to me. I want him to be beside me. I want him to look at me the way he used to. I want my kids beside us. I just want my family back. Yeah, I know I don't deserve it. Even by some miracle, we become one again. It will never be the same. I was selfish, and I wish I can take it all back. So guys, for those of you that listen to this whole saga, this whole story here, selfish, La La Land, right? He was great to her on so many fronts. Great kids, the whole 9 yards, and she screwed it all up because she was a selfish a-hole. Okay? Didn't care about him. Believe me, there are women out there who would die to have a guy that treated her that well in that situation. And now, after all this happened, and he did time, and yes, he chose to whip that guy's ass. That guy had it coming, don't get me wrong, but still, you do that, most places you're going to end up in the slammer, depending on how much time you get in the slammer. Probably depends on where you live, any priors or whatever. But she thinks she can just fix this. Now go back to normal. It's not going to happen. He's your ex, okay? He doesn't ever want to see you again, ever. Leave him alone. That's the best thing she can do. She truly cared about him and truly loved him. She'd leave him alone. He knows that she says she's sorry, but it's all really about how she feels. You can see how selfish she is and how selfish some people can be. But I'm still convinced that the guy probably was just too good to her. And I think, honestly, that she's self-loathing. I think, honestly, she thinks very low of herself. And therefore, probably because her husband treated her so well and told her she was beautiful when clearly she was 180 pounds and big and all that, that made her think that, like, how could he love me? Therefore, I'm going to lose respect for him. I'll actually be resentful towards him for loving me and treat him like crap. And there are people that do that. Okay? It's kind of like how gals will complain. They complain about the bad boys, but they always go for the scumbags because those guys treat them the way they think they feel. And those gals can never be around nice guys that treat them well because they think that they're shit. And when the nice guy treats them well, they resent them. I think that's what we got going on here. And that's some serious therapy she's going to need to figure this shit out, because she ain't going to figure it out on her own. And that is the only way she may have a chance of fixing things inside of her, and maybe one day she can have a relationship with her kids. Maybe. Frankly, those kids, I'll stay away from her, but you see my point. But anyhow, guys, I thought this would be a good one to go over here again for the relationship guys, to show you got to be careful, because you've been with a wife for 20 years, she's bored, maybe you treat her really well, but she thinks she's worth nothing, and something like this can happen. And the whole accountability thing, selfishness, the whole 9 yards. Crazy story. Now, if you guys like stories like this, you should definitely check out my other channel, They Did What, because that channel's full of stories like this in varying degrees. Some are long ones like this, some are freaking crazy stories. They're just, you can't make this crap up type of situations. So definitely check out the other channel. Click on the link below. All right, guys, that's it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this story here. And be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.